This is I don't think I've ever done one of these, in the sense of, oh, suddenly you let a bunch of buckaroos in, and that's very exciting.
It is just very, very we do things incredibly casual because
Okay,
otherwise,
yes,
yeah, we're just gonna I every single time I'm like, "I'm gonna fuck this up," and I'm like, "You know what? If we just go into it knowing I'm gonna fuck it up, it's just more
yes.
fun."
Oh, wow, yes, and also the results are always better if you just let it fly.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay, here's our chat. Okay, I see a chat here.
Yes, so I've opened up let's see, we've got chat, and then we've got oh, people are coming in from the
Oh,
room.
and they say, let it fly. I agree.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right.
Oh, thank you. Oh,
Uh,
this is fun. I'm getting all distracted by the chat. I don't know if I should close it so that I'm not gonna see things pop up.
you totally can. We will open up the Q&A. So as a matter
Oh,
of fact, you
fun.
know what? Let's go ahead and we'll do our housekeeping first, which is welcome, Nightmarelings. So excited. We have with us Chuck Tingle, who I have loved for years and years. And when Camp Damascus came out and I saw it on the shelf, I immediately was like, "Is this the Chuck Tingle?" And Vicky, who works with me, was like, "It is the Chuck Tingle." And Elizabeth, who runs the store, was like, "What's happening?" And I had to go through the whole pounded in the butt by everything and the whole and she was very confused. But Vicky and I were incredibly excited because we love him. So first off, welcome, Chuck.
Wow, thank you. That's a very fun and kind story. I'm sure if you had to explain my way and you listed the books, you probably were there overtime because there's about 300 or 400 Tinglers now. And now there are two horror novels and one traditionally published horror novel. So I'm so honored and moved by the way reception has been um, from your store in Texas to all dang over. It's just been very nice. I obviously have a pretty unique way of doing things and making art, and it's very moving to be accepted in this way. So thank you.
Well, it is absolutely fantastic. Before we get started, the chat is open, everyone, but if you have questions, we'll open them up in probably 30 minutes or so. But if you have questions, down at the bottom, there's a Q&A, so you can just write them in there. And I may already ask them in the thing, but if not, we'll go to the Q&A at the end. And so you can ask anything that you want. And so I am going to start with first saying, so I would do read your bio and all of that, but I don't think that I could do it justice. So if you want to, I know everybody here has probably at least started the book, and also warning, we are going to get into very, very quickly spoilers. So if you haven't finished the book, you may want to pause it and come back when it's on YouTube because we will be recording this and we'll share it later. So Chuck, could you tell us about yourself?
Okay. Well, let's see. Uh, Well, a lot of what I do is kind of a mystery. There's a lot of buckers online talking about who Chuck is. A lot of guesses about under the mask. And so I think what I can say, because I'm trying to over time take away more and more layers of hiding myself. And I would say that I guess the thing that would surprise most buckaroos is that I'm not playing a character. I think a lot of buckaroos think that this is some kind of like a bit or a joke or anything. I am actually not playing a character. This is kind of an expression of myself that is a way of expressing well, I'm on autism spectrum, so I am constantly masking. I could actually, when I was big, when I'm trotting around in life, you can pretty easily not know that I'm on any kind of spectrum. You can assume that I'm just a neurotypical, but that was causing me some health problems. I had chronic pain, going to the emergency room all the dang time, never ending. It was kind of it was a pretty tough time. I was basically living off painkillers because I was in so much pain. And what I learned was if I could create a space for myself to kind of let off some steam, not have to hold back my stims, not have to constantly neurotypically mask, that my pain went away, and I just became a much healthier buckaroo. So I know I already said thank you, but I would just like to say thank you again to all who have kind of accepted my unique way and supported me, because I mean this in a very literal way. You have saved my life by supporting me and kind of taking me as I am, because without the space, I just don't know what I would have done. So yeah, that's probably the best thing I could say, is that, I write things that seem very strange, and um, but I'm sincere in them. I understand that buds can laugh and can bring joy. That's okay with me. But yes, I think that's probably the most interesting thing about me, is that I am not playing a character. This is actually just kind of me.
One of the things that I love so much about your writing and your journey is that whenever I see anything that you're doing, it reminds me that there are no rules. The only real rule is like, don't be a dick. Like, just be a nice person, love everybody. Um, and so I love that there feel like there are no rules and no boundaries. Are there for you any rules or boundaries where you're like, nope, that's too far, that's crazy?
Oh, well, there's two interesting ways to interpret that. I'll kind of quickly go through both. In the most kind of literal way, when I'm writing my erotica, a lot of the time it's commenting on a current event. It's my synthesis of my thoughts on things in the world, or just ideas. Um, and with those, there's all kinds of wild different pairings and things, but I will not write about natural disaster where someone is hurt or injured or killed, or people being actively hurt, an earthquake, a train wreck, anything like that. These things happen in the news. Even COVID, um, uh, everybody. I was getting so many messages. You should write a book about pounding COVID, and I thought pounding is an act of love. This is hurting mentally. I will not do that. And then the next one is I do talk about political figures, kind of do a commentary on some that I have some problems with. But I will not do a female uh, celebrity. I will not include that, because I feel like, at least right now with culture, women are really kind of always sexualized if they're in the spotlight. And so I just don't need to add to that. I think artistically, you could kind of, make arguments for or against that in the realm of art. But for me personally, that's just not something that I like to contribute to. So those are my rules in the literal kind of way of just what won't I write about. As far as me breaking rules, dang, I know everyone's here to listen to me talk, but I feel like I'm being rambling. I apologize. Um, my my
Ramble away.
Okay. Then my three writing rules that I think would surprise most is, you are correct. I don't. There are a lot of rules of art that I do not follow. Philosophically have a pretty broad perspective on the definition of what art is, about as broad as it gets. Um, and also what makes good or bad art. I'm not even sure if I believe in that as a concept. So I'm willing to, as kind of an outsider artist myself, without traditional training of writing or a traditional path to get here, obviously, a very untraditional path. The three writing rules that I disagree with or do not follow, that are kind of dangerous to say, warning to the chat, warning to you. I gotta especially be wary of like English professors we get really mad about this, but here we go. First rule is whenever people are talking about writing, they say, "Oh, there's this thing of, oh, do you let your characters lead or do you let your plot beats lead?" This has been a question for dang ever, and you're just so everyone knows, you're supposed to say character. That's what everyone wants you to say. It's kind of, it used to be plot decades ago, and then artists learned that you're supposed to say character in this. And to be fair, that's a pretty good place to start. For Chuck, it is actually neither. It is meaning. That is my number one driver of the story. Is I find out what I want to say, the point that I want to make, but more likely the gift that I want to give the reader. Because meaning can also be like a couple of big transformers beating each other up for entertainment. Just pure entertainment is a perfectly good meaning. It just has to be a gift to your audience. And so meaning is always my driver. Meaning and the message is always driver, and then characters, and then it's plot. You're really not supposed to say that. Next thing is show versus tell. I kind of don't believe that you're never supposed to tell. In fact, I prefer it. A lot of the time when I edit things, I will look at my paragraph and think, this is way too wordy, and I'm not actually. I feel like I'm taking advantage of a reader's time if I do that, and I also sometimes feel like I'm trying to make them think I'm smart and getting into this kind of highbrow, lowbrow thing where, oh, I'm such an intellectual genius. Look at all these words. And because I write in first person present, I that just, you tell yourself in your head all that you don't show in your brain when you're walking, to the front door to answer it. You don't think, oh, my footsteps move slowly across the hardwood floor. I could feel the texture. This thing. You say, I went and got the door. That buckaroos just don't think like that, and I feel like the push for show over tell sometimes is good writing advice in a sense, but I think buckaroos can become obsessed with it to the point of you are kind of just trying to show off, and you're kind of wasting the time of the audience when in reality no one thinks like those books are written. So that's my next thing. And I had a third one, but I've rambled a lot, and I honestly, here's the thing, I can't even remember what the third one is. We'll get back to, you know what, if it pops into my head, I'm sure it'll jog my memory. But yeah, there you go. There's two. 2 out of 3 is pretty good.
That's not bad.
Yes, and very quickly, I will say the reason that I actually talk about this is because I feel like creative buckaroos always come up against this routine training that we've been getting for hundreds of years and think, oh, what the heck? My style, what I want to do, my process isn't that. So I must not be an artist. I must not be a writer. And what I like to do, the reason I'm talking about these things more that are dangerous to talk about because they can be used against you. I can read my books and say, oh, well, you can tell Chuck just puts message first or whatever, when I'm intentionally do these things. But I've had a lot of success. I mean, I'm here talking on this wonderful dang book club. And so I think other artists who are down on themselves should know that we all have a different process, and there's no such thing as a wrong artistic process. I mean, I just said I don't participate in 2 of the fundamental rules of writing. So if you're writing and you feel, oh, this isn't good, this doesn't follow this rule or this rule, but there really are no rules to that. And whatever makes your heart resonate might not be my rules, but there's something for you that is very important and will resonate with you, and that's what matters.
I love that. I love that. Um, so Camp Damascus, this is your first like mainstream book, is that right? The first one that's like really so
it's my second horror. I have a novella called Straight before this that I would say is in the same realm of the Tingle verse, which is unicorns and big feet aren't popping out of the walls. It is the horror genre. Um, this is probably my second, I would say, more traditional book in that sense in the horror realm, and my first traditional publication. Everything else is self-published.
Got it. So was it difficult to write in a, did you find yourself working in a different way, or did you just say, I'm going to do this, and how did it come about?
Well, well, the main difference is timing. When I read a Tingler, it's about something in the news and then it comes out in 24 hours. So I can comment on things very relevantly because they're sometimes they're literally still happening and I can kind of give my take on it. Um, Traditional published novels take about a year to come out from when you turn them in, and that's not even the start of writing. Camp Damascus has been done for about 2 years. So I was kind of worried, thinking, oh well, I guess what if these issues aren't a thing, or what's it going to be like writing something that isn't kind of very very current? But what I realized is that kind of conservative scoundrels, a lot of anti-LGBTQ people, which is kind of the focus of my work. It is in a lot of ways protest art. A lot of these people are very bad at imagination and ideas, and just they really run in a loop. So these systems that I'm critiquing with my horror, LGBTQ horror, queer horror, and also kind of neurodivergent horror, um, those who oppose them are going to be running the same loop over and over again. If you see the way that gay buckaroos were treated, 20 years ago, the way trans buckaroos are treated now is exactly the same. They use the same talking points, and just basically mad libs in what they used to say about gay people to trans people. It's just these are systematic problems. So while I was worried about these issues no longer being relevant a whole year later, in practice, what I found is that conservatives are just too unimaginative, and they just kind of do the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't a problem anymore. Wouldn't that have been nice if I would have said, oh, the nostalgic days when people
Yes,
were treated like crap. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So one of the things that I really loved about this is the idea of, by the way, spoilers start now. So if you haven't finished it, you might want to drop out, but totally up to you. This idea of being haunted by our demons, but that in this case it's the demons that are assigned to us, that these are not our demons, especially because, and this may just be because I live in conservative Texas and have a lot of insane old friends from high school, and I see them writing about my
Oh yes, that's
yeah,
everywhere.
us gays, they've got their demons.
I'm from Montana, so yes, we're all on the same page.
Yeah, so I love that was sort of the horror focus. How did you come up with that idea, the demons?
Well, so my normal process, I would say in like a broad way, is I I do morning walks, and I just kind of have ideas that roll around. And for a horror novel, if it's a Tingler idea, like, oh, that's a funny thing that happens in life, or everyone relates to that. That's an interesting idea. I just put it in my notes on my phone, which is with me when I trot up the hill and trot back every morning. And then the other thing is I have kind of novel ideas because I've always loved horror, and I have things I want to say, and I'd say these roll around and until they kind of bash into each other. And I would say I probably think of an idea for about 2 or 3 months of just kind of doing the morning trot, and during that time, I start telling the story to myself, well, like you would around a campfire. I plan out all the beats. I think about and I do everything in my head pretty much every day. And then after 2 or 3 months, when I'm finished with that and I finally time to time to write it down. And when that time comes is when I think, okay, I could just speak this out loud to someone and hit every beat of the story. Then I sit down to write it. And I would say once that happens, each novel takes about 3 to 4 weeks. And it generally comes out pretty, there's many edits, but the structure is pretty much there because I do it all in my head on these walks. So when I actually sit down to type it out, I'm almost like copying it from a piece of paper, if that makes sense. And this Camp Damascus actually came from an idea that was sparked by watching like a lot of exorcism movies or a lot of horror films that deal with hell. There's this kind of interesting thing that I always notice is they're kind of inherently problematic in a way because a lot of them move on the crux of hell is real, God is real, demons are real, judgment is real. And there is so many implications of that that is very depressing, not for the human side, but for the, oh my gosh, religion is real. That is terrifying. Just thinking like, okay, so if this demon exists, does that mean that gay people are gonna go to hell? I mean, there's so much if you extrapolate, oh, this demon exists and sin is real. If you take those traditions and run with them, so I've always thought it was kind of weird that that's never addressed. And that if you really follow it to the end and say, well, God's real, and yes, there were a lot of genocides, and he was just kind of hanging around. There's just kind of this thing where I thought, well, what if it was the church using this as a way of the ends justify the means? Now, I think that was the inspiration point. Is I don't want anyone to think that, well, you've read it. It is not an anti-religion book. It's anti-using religion for hate. So even though that was kind of the genesis of me starting to think about these things, I don't think that ended up being the point of the book ultimately, because I think the point of the book is, well, there's a lot of points, but it is about twisting stories, interpreting them how you want, using them to justify hateful things. And I think ultimately for Rose, it's about finding balance. She swings pretty hard to not religious at all. And then I think ultimately kind of comes back to a bit of a middle ground where maybe I would say she's a spiritual person at the end, maybe not religious, because she does, technically speaking, she does kind of create the catalyst for the revenge through an ancient prayer. So she's still very scientific, but I think she carved out a space for a little balance sometimes and to have room for, maybe I'm just going to do this strange thing and see what happens.
What my favorite character in the book was Saul, because not only does he goes through the entire crazy bullshit, and as I was reading it, especially the first part, which is it was to me very cringy because I was reliving like my childhood being part of like a very culty, judgmentally sort of church, and feeling that like, oh my God, I remember those things, and I remember that judgment, and I remember the like, if you don't wear a dress, you're going to go to hell, and if you play musical instruments, you'll go to hell. And I mean, it wasn't even like pounded in the butt; it was real low stakes.
Yes.
You're going to hell. But I loved Saul because he still kept his belief, and and I love that he was like, I mean, if demons exist, then it has to mean that the opposite exists. And I think there's something to be said for looking at the terrible things that happen in life and saying, well, but we only recognize them because really great things happen as well. And so I was really actually
Yes.
very happy that character was there.
I think it's very important. I think that I talk a lot, and if anyone ever just asks for writing advice from Chuck, I don't love to give out advice because I always think, well, who the heck am I to say? And what works for one person, I don't like to tell people that they're doing anything wrong with their art. But kind of the one thing that I can say is that for me, writing from a place of love and creating from a place of love um, will cure almost any problems that I have. And I do think it generally works for other buckaroos of, oh, I have writer's block. Well, how do I follow this? What do I do? If you use love as the fuel in your art, then you just got the wind at your back, bud. Like you've discovered just a real amazing fuel. And sometimes that can be hard to parse in specific terms what that means. And I think the character of Saul is kind of going to be my go-to example of, if I wrote Camp Damascus from a place of hate, and I did not like religion, and I was angry about it, I don't think I could have included Saul, and I think he is maybe, I won't say the best character, but he is a very important character, and I don't think the book would work without Saul, um, because Saul is religious, deeply religious, and I deeply care for that character, and I think that that character is, this is not an anti-religion book. It is just it is anti-religion for hate, and I like Saul as an example for what that can look like. So if you come from a place of love, you're gonna uncover all this nuance, and I think that's so important.
I love that. And you definitely could feel it and could see it. So what has been like the best uh thing that's come from this book?
Wow. You mean in my daily life?
Mhm.
Well, okay. I think that it's I have always known that the art I was making from way back when I started writing Tinglers, it has been a pretty hard sell because a lot of buckaroos are trained to I think there's a sort of irony poet poisoning on the internet. I have said the whole time that what I am creating is sincerely deep to me, and that even though these things are funny, I'm pretty good at leaning into comedy, but I don't see them as me writing. The purpose is not to parody romance novels or anything like that. This is just it's a very deep and important part of my soul of joyful sexuality, of um, kind of magical realism and fantasy. And I mean, even the point of Tinglish from the beginning, outside of expressing a part of my soul, is conservatives used to always have this thing about gay marriage. Well, they said, well, if we let a man and a man get married, what's next? A man and a dang Bigfoot, or four women in a tree. They would just go dang bananas. And I always thought, who the heck cares? That sounds wonderful. Everybody can marry Bigfoot. Why not? And I always thought this doomsday scenario that they would paint, this is kind of all the way up until maybe the mid aughts, was always kind of just not doomsday. It was a utopia. And so I kind of started writing all these tinglers thinking, actually, a joyful, loving connection between anyone who can consent and is kind of a wonderful world that they're describing. So that started, and I, because there's just so much irony everywhere, especially with queerness, especially with something strange, and I'm neurodivergent, so I understand my tastes are unique. um, it's basically taken almost a decade for buckaroos to actually understand what I'm trying to say with my art, and that is very meaningful to me. Uh, and I think having a traditional publisher understand that right away and want to support me without question is a huge blessing. I think it has really changed my life, and that's the biggest change from publishing this. Is I can come in, and I don't even know an example to give, but I can come in and be treated like um, an artist with something to say, and kind of, instead of hold a place of someone for people to laugh at, maybe more like a John Waters or something like that, an outsider artist who actually has a point and a perspective. So that has been a really great it has just pushed that process forward 10 times faster than it had been, I think.
I love that. And I'm trying to remember because while there is a giant part of me is like, yay, everybody else in the world gets to discover you. There's a little part of me that's like, ah, no, he's our special
Yes,
secret. But
yes.
I'm trying to remember like when I first heard of you, and I want to say it was maybe Neil Gaiman had said something about you. And I was just
Yes.
like, okay, well, I'm in, and I absolutely was.
Neil Gaiman has treated me very well from day one, and I should also say a lot of Buckaroos, and this is totally fine. You know, I'm not. This doesn't hurt me or anything. I understand that most Buckaroos will see a book title that shocks them, and they think, "Oh, this is so funny." That's okay. I'm not talking them to any. I would say that's 98% of how Buckaroos are familiar with Chuck. It is almost the Trojan horse for the message. And so I don't fault anyone for that. Um, but it is just it's just the way that it is, I guess. And I'm fortunately it doesn't it just I understand it. And I also, as I said earlier, I can lean into comedy. I don't like to write comedy. I think I've told other Buckers this, but kind of before COVID, I was talking to some Hollywood folks about a Tingle TV show that we were trying to get going on a network who approached Chuck, and everyone was trying to make me write these funny episodes. And I kind of just realized the reason it didn't work, other than COVID happening. I think we were about to do a deal or sign a thing week before that, literally a week. But the thing that I never really liked about it was that format, they kept on pushing me towards these comedy ideas. And when I write a Tingler, I really don't think this is a comedy. I think of the story, I kind of think it's a moral fable, like Aesop's Fables or something like that, or just kind of a little joyful fantasy erotica thing. And then as I'm writing it, I think I'm kind of a naturally funny person. So I just start, there's comedy get like oozes in there somehow, but it's not my intent. I actually, and I think that's the same for Camp Damascus. Actually, I didn't write it with any humor in mind at all, but just the way that I write and kind of the ideas I think of are just kind of naturally become kind of funny.
I love what you said about the Trojan horse because I mean that's what books are all about. One of my favorite things when I'm picking books for this book club and for Fantastic Strangelings is sending out books that people later go, I never would have read this, but I'm glad that I did. And I think that's such a great way to bring in open-mindedness and to let you understand different people do things in different ways, and there's great things we can learn from that. And this same very much fable sort of where I'm just like, oh, I can. As a matter of fact, before, because I'm totally going to forget. Speaking of storytelling, as I was reading it, I kept getting all of these little, Peter Pan references, and I'm sure I didn't get all of them, but I got like, the Darlings and the Shadow and Neverton, like Never Neverland, and Pastor Bend with his, like just like Captain Hook, it
His
bends with
hand,
his
yes.
hook. And so those are the only ones that I got. I didn't get any of the other ones. But I was discussing with someone else and I was like, okay, but do you think that's because, and I'm probably reading too much into it. I'm like, is it because these people are in this suspended childhood, or is it because they're lost, like the Lost Boys, or
Can I say very good job? A lot of Buckaroos approach you this. I think you naturally found more than anyone I've spoken to, and you're actually pretty close on what it means. By the way, anyone watching this, I wrote a 4-part series called Deconstructing Damascus that's on Tumblr. I should make like a permanent link to it or something that will basically tell you every Easter egg and things. And I have a pretty broad view of art in the sense that these don't have to be true. For whatever my conclusions are, you can interpret it your own way, but there's pretty strong and ways to interpret it. To go through your Peter Pan one, yes, you are correct. So everyone there, all the kids are in a state of suspended kind of childhood. It's just like Never Neverland. Um, and because I just noticed with Christian communities, when you really think about kind of pray the gay away, all these things, all this kind of anti-trans stuff as well, it is all really these parents trying to make their children children forever and never have their own agency. So the agency in Camp Damascus is the symbol of the shadow. The first line is "You've got no shadow," and it's basically Patchett comes out of the shadows. All these things are if you change shadow into agency or kind of self-actualized adulthood, that's what the shadow is. And about halfway through the book, Rose wrestles with her shadow, kind of gets control of it. And then actually, when I wrote this, I wrote the first book, or I wrote the first line and the last line of the book first, actually. I knew what the first line and the last line was going to be. And that's the point of the book. I think some buckaroos are disappointed and they think, oh, it ended too fast. And to be honest, it's designed that way. I knew that it would not, because there's no wrap up. And the reason I did that was I knew it would bother a couple of buckaroos, but artistically I had to, because the real story is about Rose's agency. So if you take your book and you flip to the last page and then start from the beginning, you will see first line is "You've got no shadow." Last line is an approximation. I don't remember it word for word, but it is essentially our shadows covered the whole town, and
stretches on for miles, fully engulfing the city below.
Yes, and that shadow is created by the burning camp. They are kissing, and their massive shadows, as big as they've ever been, are covering the town. So that is the journey of the book, is Rose's shadow, actually. And so that's kind of the Peter Pan references. I will very quickly hit a few others for you. Smee is Dr. Smith. Smith is actually a version of Smee. And if you look in the text, he is always sitting in a blue and white striped chair. He is kind of described in a similar way. Pete Bend's henchman. It's Pete Bend is or Pastor Bend. It's Peter Hook, because if you read the original text, Peter's kind of a villain in the original story, not the Disney version. It's not just implied. It is said that Peter, the reason there's only kids there isn't because they magically don't age. It's because he kills them off so that it's only children in Neverland. Yeah, so I thought, well, let's give Wendy a sort of win, not just against Peter, but also or Hook, but also Peter. So I kind of combine them into one character. Willow is the crocodile. Her mug that she drinks from has a crocodile, and she's met in a town called Lebcaroc, which is actually I think it's Spanish for Skull Rock, which is the little town outside of Neverton. Also, a lot of things with the crocodile is that ultimately, by shooting the gas can, she is the one that takes down Captain Hook, which kind of makes sense. Pete Bend, and then also everything she does involves a rhythm. So her steady click of her camera is the clock for the crocodile, and all those different things. Even though it's harder to see, I envision Saul as the Lost Boys, kind of just running this kind of outside the community thing, but also still, I don't mean this as a takedown of spirituality, but he's still in touch with imagination, which is kind of their power. Is he's the one who's still spiritual and still has faith in an existence beyond this one, and that's kind of his power. So he is the Lost Boys. I'm trying to think. There's probably a couple other. I mean, if you actually know what I just said and know what to look for, the whole dang book has a very interesting I call it the fairy tale layer. There's the fairy tale layer, biblical layer and literal layer. And I did that because it's a story about how you can interpret a book any way you want. So I thought, wow, what a fourth wall kind of cool thing to do that make three layers on top of them of how can I interpret this book? So fairy tale, biblical, and literal are the layers.
I love it. I love it. There it was I love when it feels like the author has left like a puzzle for you, and I would be like, oh, I get the puzzle, and so I love not only that I got it, but that I also didn't get these other ones, and now I'm like, ah, dang it! But I'm going to go back and read it again, knowing that.
Yes. Well, you know, and the main one, it's very interesting writing with that many layers because sometimes a buckaroo will say, "Oh, it was very, it was on the surface or something." Someone said to me, and I just thought, "Oh, you mean like when you get to the biblical layer and you know how Isaiah said that Camp Damascus will burn and the sheep and rams will walk in the streets." So obviously, you know, he's saying that it'll burn at the end and that the demons walk around. I have no idea what you're talking about. I just noticed that her name was Rose Darling, and I was like, oh boy. I mean, another of the things that I think buckaroos don't. A couple of them. The tone of the story, you know, I could have easily made Rose just a high school age, but it probably would have been easier to write. But she is 20 because they're held back 2 years. So that's the most obvious. We're trying to keep everyone a child. Um, and you know, it is written, everything about it is written in a way where you're supposed to think, why are these people acting so young? Kind of including that I wouldn't call it, it's definitely not a YA book, but it is trying to evoke the feeling of a YA book, but way too violent for a YA book. But sort of you're supposed to read it like you'd read the dang Hardy Boys or Babysitter's Club or something, because everything about it should be, gosh, this seems kind of eerily, I can't put my finger on it, but something about this seems younger than it should be, is kind of the feeling I was trying to elicit. And I feel like some buckaroos just don't like that because they think that it was an accident or something. But it's actually very intentional and kind of just goes with the theme of the book. I mean, even down, there's so much in this that is intentional, even down to Willow listening to Wu-Tang Clan is a little inside joke. There's any Wu-Tang fans in the chat? First, it's that everything at her has to involve rhythm. But second, I don't know if anyone's seen ODB at the 1998 Grammy Awards, but he stole the microphone and said Wu-Tang is for the children, which is a Wu-Tang quote now. So even her listening to Wu-Tang has something to do with fighting, being a child, and kind of trying to become an adult.
So good. You know, it's interesting. As I was reading it, I had flashbacks to when I was in, you know, like junior high school, and I read like every Christopher Pike book, and there it had a similar sort of where I was like, oh, I'm getting all this information and it's really going, it's great. But then there were these deeper levels, and so well,
yes.
it worked for me. Good job.
Yes, it is. I mean, I naturally write high pace. I would say, I think that there are things about it that my writing in my next four novels, I'm a fast paced buckaroo, which I think is kind of YA and stuff, and also the fact that I really don't like to only show. I will tell sometimes is also kind of YA. So there's parts of it, but for this, I very much intentionally kind of leaned into the this, yeah, you said Christopher Pike or Fear Street or something, and then all of a sudden you're just hit with a, wow, that is a room full of people without their skin who are still alive. I think that's a little more extreme than R.L. Stine. So there's just these things that happen where you're suddenly shocked with, oh wow, or if you dive deeper, you see a lot of themes that are more adult because there's just so many of them in kind of a sophisticated way, hidden under the Trojan horse again of this kind of younger feeling read.
Exactly. All right. So we have questions in our Q&A. Sorry, I went a little over because I was so excited. Let's see. So
That's fun.
what's your favorite book and or author?
Oh, wow. Okay, oh my gosh, I knew this would happen. I knew this would happen. Back when I was listing the three things that I openly say about myself as an author that you're not supposed to say. The third one that I forgot, and I knew someone would remind us, is that the advice is always for authors. Read, like, just always read. That's, you have to read a bunch if you're a writer. And I say, I if that works for Buckaroos, that's great. I do not read very much. Most of my inspiration is from art, visual art, painters, things like that, music, and mostly film. So I do not read that much. I think it's part of my autism is that when I can hyper focus on writing, I can sit down and write a whole dang book in a day. And the second I open a book to read it, my brain instantly starts thinking, oh, what would I do if I was writing this? Where would I go? And I read 4 pages, and by the time I look down, I think I have not internalized how did I even get here? I disappear into some other place. So I think that audiobooks have been very good for me. But my biggest influences are not writers. And like I said, I just want to say that so that Buckaroos can know there's no right or wrong way to make art. There's a lot of writers who read a lot, and that's important too. I would say I will just answer and say my biggest influences. Um, uh, there's actually four, none of them authors. Would be David Byrne of Talking Heads. Well, let's say it's two Davids and two Andys. It's a David Byrne, uh, uh, David Lynch, Andy Warhol, and Andy Kaufman. So that is a singer, a film director, painter, and a performance artist. So that's my answer. Curveball.
That works. So what's your favorite book that you've written?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I don't know if I should say that right now. It's actually, well, gosh, I don't know the politics of this. My favorite book that I've written is Bury Your Gaze, the next book on my horror contract. It's the follow up to Camp Damascus. Not a sequel or anything, but it will be out next summer, and is the second book of my horror deal with Nightfire.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Let's see. Da-da-da. Okay, not exactly book related, but as a neurotypical mom to a child with autism, is there any advice you had for me on helping my child to tackle the world while still holding tight to who he is?
Wow, I just talked to a bud about this who asked me exactly the same advice. First thing I would say is that autism is a spectrum, and it is a wide spectrum. I mean, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the DSM was updated at some point and kind of started these different categories because it is so broad. And I think that listening to your child and understanding that their needs are going to be individual needs is probably the best thing I could say because my story is one of joy. When I was diagnosed as autistic, I've actually, as long ago that I was diagnosed with something called Asperger's. They've changed what it's called. But I was so joyful because I was a big fan of David Byrne and Talking Heads. I saw him on TV on dang David Letterman, and I thought, this is the first time I've ever seen someone who acts like me. And then when I learned that he was autistic, and then was subsequently diagnosed with it, I thought, this is so cool. I am part of the coolest club ever. All of my heroes are autistic. And honestly, that's why, as mainly with Chuck, I talk about my autism all the time because at first I kind of didn't want to talk about it because I thought it kind of hurts. I didn't want to hurt anyone by saying, well, being autistic has been nothing but great for me. And I love being autistic. I think it's cool and not traumatic at all for me because there are a lot of stories of trauma. It's hard for a lot of buckaroos, but I realized joyful perspectives are necessary as well because, I had David Byrne before me. I would like to do that for someone else. If someone is diagnosed, that they can think, oh wow, Chuck's so cool. That I'm so excited to be autistic. Um, and so I guess that is just a summary to say, there are so many versions of it, and to treat it like that, to just treat it as a sort of an individual experience, and to have an open line of thought and communication about that, because it is both tragic and joyful, and that's okay.
Yeah, like your mileage may vary. I love it.
Exactly.
Lindsay says, as someone who grew up deeply religious and has had to step away from beliefs in order to come back to it on my own terms, I just want to say thank you for a complex, nuanced look at belief. Let's see. Anonymous.
I want to say thank you back. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yay. Anonymous attendee asks, what is your background? Are you in a bathroom? Not judging, just my eyes can't confirm, and it will make my weird brain question.
Oh, it's very blurry. Someone just taught me to do this blur thing, but yes, it is. I am just in a dang bathroom, because it is a very quiet part of the house. That's about it. Honestly, I started. I don't really know why. I think it's because it's very nondescript, so no one can track Chuck down. But I uh, I started doing Zooms and stuff in this room, and I probably don't need to. There's other places that are going to work just fine, but it is now tradition.
Well, it makes for good acoustic, so it's working.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Let's see. After a day of masking literally or neurodivergently, what is your preferred recovery method?
Oh, dang! I know exactly what it's going to be. Old Chuck. I love music. I talk about a lot, and I love jazz, especially bossa nova. And so I would say my number one, like, end of the day treat is taking either a magazine that I subscribe to, whatever just came in the mail, or horror graphic novels, a lot of Junji Ito, a lot of other stuff, and having a bath with a bath bomb. By the way, pop that sizzle in there, get the good scent going. What I'm really into right now is this one, from a company that I believe is from Ashley Tisdale from High School Musical. Grew up to start a bath bomb company, and it smells so dang good. Burgundy. Is it Burgundy? No, Bergamot. What if I was bathing in Burgundy? No, Bergamot. Put my Bergamot bath bomb in. Get my Junji Ito graphic novels, put on some bossa nova, and sit in the bathtub. That's the number one end of the day for me.
Oh my God. Okay. I love that so much. And not just because, oh, I don't know if I can get it up high enough. This back row behind all the creepy dolls is all
Oh,
every
I
single
see
one
it.
of them. Yeah,
I see that.
Yep.
May I ask, what is your favorite?
I like any of the ones where girls are the main characters. I know that sounds really strange, but
No, yes, I know what you mean. There's a type. I mean,
yes.
starting from was it Tommy all the
Mhm.
way up to, yeah. There's kind of just a character that he has. That's you know what? In fact, I think what's funny enough is I think the big thick one that's coming, the next one out, is only stories about this one girl.
It is, and I got an advance copy, and it's so good.
Oh,
It's so
okay.
good.
But are they connected and I just didn't notice, or is this a new thing? What, like, are these reprinted from older things?
I have not seen them before, but I only read the books.
I
So
don't think
yeah,
I have either. Yeah, it's so interesting.
I think it's called Tombs, and
Yes.
it's a little hit or miss, but I liked it.
My favorite is Goyo, I think, the fish one, which I've read a lot of reviews of buckers that say, oh, that's the worst one or something. I really like it. It's pretty dang strange, but I love it.
Oh, I liked it, and I liked the spiral one. I can't remember what it's called. Yeah, they're all good.
Uzumaki. Uzumaki.
Yes,
Yeah. Oh, there. It's in the
Oh my
chat
gosh.
now. There you go.
So good. So good. Let's see. And this is a very specific question, but it's going to open up into a bigger one. So any upcoming events in the, I'm going to say any is probably New England area. Any upcoming events in New England or anywhere else?
Well, there's things I can't say, but they are far from New England, unfortunately. I would say that I believe, I guess I can just, I'm not stepping on toes if I just say what I believe. I think that the Barrier Gaze book tour next summer will be quite a bit more extensive than the Camp Damascus one. And Camp Damascus was, I mean, I went all over the dang place. I was on the dang road for a month, but I think, yeah, I think that Barrier Gaze, I'm going to get out to more places. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I like trotting around the country.
Come to Texas. We will
I would
host
love
you.
to. Oh,
That'll be fun. That will be fun. Okay. Well, hello. Perfect timing. We're wrapping up like right around 7. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have?
no, that this was great. I mean, I'm okay with going a few over if we want to have a final question.
Oh, sure. Anybody else have any questions? Let's see. New England, New England. A lot of people saying yes. Please come to Texas. Lots of other people who also like Junji Ito. I always, when people look at the books, they're like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "You'll either really like it or you will not like me anymore." I mean, it's one of
Yes, that's true.
I got my my kid to read one of them, and halfway through they were like, "I'm not sure about this," and then they got to the end and they were like, "Okay, give me the next one." And so now they have their own collection of them, and so yeah, I took them with
Yes,
them to college, and I was like, "Those were my copies. A bunch of those were my copies," and they were like, "No, they're mine now." So it spreads
yes,
like a virus, a good virus. Let's see. So the next new topic for your book, so that's Barrier Gaze, right? And it's
yes.
also horror themed, is that right?
I would say it is more horror and somehow funnier than Camp Damascus. It's not somehow because Camp Damascus is not really funny. It is sometimes, but Barrier Gate. I call it. I think of it as my neon pop book, and it takes place. The main character is a Hollywood screenwriter. I think there are some things in that book as far as the horror goes that not only is it also horror, it is so extreme that I was a little worried about. And my editors have said, no, that this is great. I would say think of it like, well, I can't say much about it yet, other than that things have happened since I wrote it, because I wrote it at the same time as Camp Damascus, that are, it's almost like I'm telling the future with this book in a lot of ways. And I just find the tone of it to be, you know how everyone said, oh, Midsummer, I just call it Midsummer. I'm going to call it Midsummer. I know it's spelled differently. They said Midsummer is um, pioneering bright horror, if that makes sense. I would say that this has the kind of daylight horror aesthetic, very bright and everything's in the open, but very horrifying. So that would be how I would describe the tone. It's also pretty dang funny.
I love it. I love it. So I love horror books, movies, whatever. And Midsummer, although I don't know, to me it didn't, I loved it, but to me it didn't feel like horror so much.
It's
It's interesting. Most of my favorite horror is like it's very, it happens in the daylight and has all is, and I've had so many people who are like, you need to watch Skinamarink, I think is what it's called. And I
oh
watched
my
the
gosh,
first part of it. I can't see it. It's too dark. I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
I very much enjoyed that movie. It disturbed me deeply, but I saw it in theaters, and I thought, I am so glad that I saw this in theaters, because I feel like if you watched it at home, it's so long and kind of such a like a moody, you just kind of exist in this space for 3 hours kind of film that I feel like I would have gotten on my dang phone or something. And I'm just I loved loved it in theaters, but I also understand. I think a lot of buckaroos would have trouble with watching it now because it's not in theaters. I think it's a real, you just kind of gotta lay back and exist in the zone of it for a while.
I watched the Blair Witch Project when it first came out back before a big internet, before when everybody was like, is it real? Is it not real? Who knows? And I watched it in the theater, and I remember being terrified and like people leaving the theater crying. And
Oh yes.
oh my gosh. And then I pulled it up because for my kid, I was like, look, we're going to do a full horror education. We're going to start with Psycho. We're going to go through. And so then I was like, okay, so we're going to watch Blair Witch. And they were like, this is so dumb. And it's so,
Wow.
I don't know. And I was like, I don't understand. This is terrifying. You just, and I couldn't tell if it was because they weren't in a theater or if it was because they'd never spent any time like out in the woods in the country like I had, where I could like imagine
Yes.
it. And yeah.
Well, you know what you know what I think it is that horror, because of the internet, because of kind of younger pop culture, being raised on things like creepy pasta and spooky videos that people are making in their backyard about seeing a figure or something. Um, I think that the internet has taken, because there's so many of those videos, has kind of taken the visceral reaction to that the first time. You kind of have to imagine that you'd never heard of a dang Slender Man thing or any of these kind of internet meme type horror. Um, and if you had never even heard of that, imagine going to a theater where everyone, even your dang parents, even the newspaper was saying this is real. Um, that is kind of, I think, I don't know if you could really watch Blair Witch the same because of culture now. But for that brief moment, it was wonderful.
Oh my gosh. It was our War of the Worlds. That's, I
Yes, that's very good. Yes, absolutely.
Yep. Yep. Uh-huh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Somebody said I saw Blair Witch in a small Texas theater as well. Did you have to go to Odessa? Because they wouldn't show it in my theater because they were afraid demons would come out of the theater. So I had to drive to Odessa to see it.
Wow, that is wild.
Yep. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. West Texas is insane. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
I had
jeez.
so much fun. This was so fun. Oh my gosh.
Yes,
This was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining
thank
us. One of my
you.
favorite ones. Oh,
Okay, everybody, love is real. Thank you for talking.
it's fun.